So even though everybody said it's impossible to get your offer accepted, you did. You succeeded and you won, signed contract, it's ratified, earnest money's in, you're all good. Until you get that appraisal number and it's back below the price that you're paying. Now that's a problem for a lot of reasons, and we're gonna get into that, and let's get after it right now. If that's something that sounds like a horror story you've read in the news, or you've had a friend or a family member come up with a low appraisal, I can assure you it's not very fun. I've actually been the recipient of this on an investment property one time, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about you and the East Bay real estate environment. My name is Struzyna with the Gunderman Group at Keller Luxury International, and I want to bring to you some value today regarding this appraisal process. In the heat of competition, what happens a lot of times is people increase their offers to win, leapfrogging one another as much as $30, $50, or $100,000 in some cases in order to try and win the day. And that's really good and gratifying until you have to go get the opinion of an appraiser. Anytime you're getting a loan, the lender is going to make you pay for an appraiser who is an independently licensed third-party individual who is not a party to the contract, meaning they have no financial interest in the outcome of that contract. They don't get paid a commission, they don't get paid fees of any kind out of the contract. It's just simply money to go do a job. And what they're supposed to do as an independent, non-biased person is go support the purchase price of your home. Now, with the seller's market that we're in today, and competition being at really an all-time high, what happens is those purchase prices kind of get pushed over the comps almost every single time, and eventually the appraiser simply doesn't have comparable homes to look at to validate the purchase price you're getting with your contract. So let's talk about that process, and let's talk about how to avoid that. So once you get your offer accepted, your lender will order the appraisal, and they'll put it out to their pool of appraisers, and someone will raise their hand and say, I'll take that, I'll go do it for a certain fee, right? And that person gets the contract, they see how much competition there was on the house, and then they go physically to the house, they measure it, they look at the upgrades, they look at any additions or any defects or what have you, and then they make notes, they take pictures, they do all of that kind of stuff. And then they go home and they look for comparable sales. What they're looking for specifically is other houses in the neighborhoods that we call comps, as probably you know by now, or comparables, right? To support the value that you're paying. They're generally speaking really trying to look at a price per square foot. And that is really, really important to know, and we'll talk about that in a second. But they basically do all this computation, they create this big long PDF, and they say, here's what we can support based on all of these factors with these houses that sold at this price and that price, and these additions or subtractions. We came out with this number, and congratulations, we can support your purchase price. Or in the rare but terrifying scenario that they can't support your purchase price, all of a sudden, you have a very sticky situation on your hands. So let's talk about the ramifications of that. Now, if you held onto an appraisal contingency, and I did a video on appraisal contingencies, I'll link to it here, you have an ability to negotiate based on whatever comes back from that appraiser. However, if you don't have it, which is the case in most transactions here in the East Bay, people are waiving contingencies. You, as the buyer, are contractually obligated to perform at a certain price in a certain amount of days to that seller. But then you've got this low appraisal and this bank that will now only lend you money based on the appraised value, not on the price that you wrote. I did actually a video about market price and market value. I'll link to it up here. That's kind of what we're talking about. What someone's willing to pay for it versus what somebody can support, or what they could pay for, what it should go for, etc. Using comps as opposed to using what one person wants to pay to win, right? So go watch that video for this concept. But broadly speaking, that's what we're talking about. Now, as a buyer, you in that moment have one option, really, according to your contract, which is to bring in enough cash to make up the difference between the appraisal value that the appraiser came up with and the purchase price that you have a contract for, all right? So what is it that you can do to avoid all of this sort of thing, other than just bring a bunch of money into the transaction? Well, number one, you need to know the neighborhood you're bidding on. You need to look at your comps very, very closely before you write a or you remove an appraisal contingency. And what you really need to look at is price per square foot, and you need to look at the nuances of those houses versus the one you're writing on. Does this one have a basement and that one doesn't? Are you looking at one with a big view and one that doesn't have it, et cetera, et cetera? All of those factors come into play. And then if you can find yourself in an appropriate range with the comps of your price per square foot, you probably have a pretty good appraisal or chance of appraising. Additionally, and I wouldn't even say this is second, I would say this is equally as important as the comps, is your cash position. Now what that means is how much cash you have available in the event that the appraiser has a bad day, doesn't have his cup of coffee, and ends up giving you a low number. How much cash would you realistically be willing to come out of pocket for above the appraised value to complete this contract? And make sure you are seriously willing to pull the trigger and actually bring that to the closing table, because there is a possibility that you might, in order not to default on the contract and have the seller go after your deposit. That's another video. But those are the two most sober decisions you really have to make before writing a contract without an appraisal contingency. But before you do all of that stuff on a per contract basis, the other thing that you can do as a buyer is to do your homework on the lender. Because like I said before, when you get that contract accepted and you go ahead and you send it over to the lender and then they order from their pool of appraisers, it's really helpful to know who that pool of appraisers are and how someone gets into that pool. So let's talk about this for a second. Not all lenders are created equal. There's a lot of big banks, huge institutional lending arms in this country that have really broad reaching geographies and huge appraiser pools, right? The same is true here in California. There are people who do appraisals here in the Bay Area who live in the Central Valley or way up in Tahoe in some cases. It's a very, very wide net in some situations. So what you want to make sure happens is you talk to that lender when you're doing your interview process and find out what their pool of appraisers are. Who gets to be in their pool? What qualifications do they have? Etc., etc. Because we trade as is, and we have very much custom homes here in the Bay Area and specifically the East Bay. And so it is not like model plan A, B, C, and D, and you just do a few upgrades and you're done. You really have to, on a one-by-one basis, figure out what this home is worth. And it is not that simple. And somebody who doesn't know the nuances of this market will have a hard time appraising it accurately. So you want to hear things from your lender like they have to live within 10 miles of the subject property. They have to have been appraising for 10 years or more. They have to have a certain qualification or a certain license set of specialty for the area that's appropriate for you, that sort of thing. And basically what you want to hear is that it's a smaller pool of appraisers who are maybe higher skilled, maybe a little more familiar with those properties, have been doing it in a neighborhood or a geography for quite some time, that sort of thing. Like that is really one of the biggest things that gets overlooked in this whole appraisal conversation. And I promise you, if you ask that question up front and get clarity and then choose a lender who has not only a good rate, but can actually get it done on the appraisal side as well, you have given yourself a huge distinct advantage when it comes to negotiating, because you know that you can justify it, but someone from 150 miles away would have a hard time seeing it that way. But if someone lives 10 miles away, they get it, they'll understand it, right? So make sure you ask that question ahead of time, because it's so critical. And I can tell you for a fact, I had this experience, quick anecdote. Someone went with one of the bigger institutions as opposed to one of the local lenders who has that tighter appraisal pool. They went with someone who said they could get them a little bit less of a rate. For argument's sake, it was about $75,000 less in interest over 30 years. Okay, going with this bigger institution with the lower rate, right? It was a couple $100 a month, whatever it was. And the appraiser, because it was this wide pool, someone came from over 100 miles away to appraise this house, ended up coming in short $200,000, right? I mean, for one, this person used a listing price as opposed to calling the listing agent, finding out what it's actually under contract for as an appraised value. we all know that these are teaser prices, they're artificially low. So as a result, they got a super low value. There was also some issues about how much square footage was measured and that sort of thing. So it really skewed the data badly. In the end, $200,000 shortfall in an effort to save a couple $100s a month on the rate, right? And over the lifetime of that loan, $200,000 today or $75,000 over 30 years, right? The ease of getting these deals done, the ability to negotiate in a strong position, it all really matters. So hopefully you got some value out of that. And if you did, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel because I'm going to continue to put out weekly content just like this and you're not going to want to miss it. So without any further ado, let's get on out of here. This is Struzyna with the Gunderman Group signing off for now. See you guys on the next one.